When you took the job on the fishing ship, Monger of the Sea, you understood the risk involved. They fish for giant squid, and there's always the risk of coming across the giant squid, the kraken. Not to mention the usual suspects of sea devils, sea dragons, and other assorted hazards. You assured yourself most of those are just stories. Tall tales sailors and adventurers told to impress the locals and beat their chests. So when the storm set in, figured this would be just another rough night at sea. Then the lookout yelled wave, and the last thing you thought about hit. A rogue wave rolled your ship, and almost on cue, fins began to circle, and shipmates disappeared beneath the surf one by one. The screams froze your blood, and you cried out with all your soul to be rescued from this painful death. The air froze, and she rose from the now calm mirror-like sea. Half out of the water, her beauty stern yet undeniable. She offered not only salvation from this tragic end, but the eternal allure of immortality. You and your shipmates said yes without a second thought. A crooked smile came across her face as she raised the rest of the way out of the calm sea, and you knew this was a bad decision. Bone ships are vast, multi-mast sailing ships created with the bones of dead sea creatures and sailors alike. Most are at least 100 feet long and rise at least 2 stories above the waterline. Whale bones, due to their vast size and strength, often serve as the core structural elements, while bones of dead sailors and smaller sea creatures form the other structures and decorations of the ship. Muscles and tendons serve as the ropes and other moving portions, and for size reference, they weigh in at gargantuan. Now, why would I start a bone ship lore with the story of an undead goddess? Well, our friend the giant squid fisherman just entered into a pack where he really never had a choice. Ugathera is the Venetian goddess of physical excess, disease, and most importantly for this story, the undead. She generally appears as an attractive, pale-skinned and ebony-haired woman. Unlike mortal women, her flesh begins to rot and wither away at her waist, leaving her as little more than a blood-soaked skeleton from the hips down. The story goes that Ugathera was once a hedonistic mortal woman. Upon her death, she fled Pharasma's boneyard and returned to Golarion. Without going too far down the rabbit hole of the pantheon of the planet Golarion, the Lady of Graves, Pharasma, is the goddess who shepherds Golarion's recently departed souls to their final reward. Upon death, souls migrate via the River of Souls to Pharasma's boneyard in the Outer Sphere. And now the Outer Sphere sits on top an impossibly tall spire that pierces the astral plane. Now when our evil goddess of the undead, Ugathera, escaped said boneyard and returned to the physical plane, it made her the Great Beyond's very first undead creature. Her return to the mortal world is said to be the origin of disease.
One of the main creators of all bone ships are evil deities in general, not just Ugathera. When a sailor makes a final plea to a dark god, like our giant squid fisherman, or when a deity takes the opportunity to bind many dead sailors' souls together, as a destructive show of divine power, they will raise bone ships to carry out their plans, often to reap destruction upon their enemies, or to just be the macabre ocean Uber for their undead armies.
One of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Charon the boatman, counts many bone ships among his followers. You'll find them up and down the river Styx, while others ferry his apostles to other planes. Charon's bone ships approach slowly rather than speeding towards their quarry, giving more time for the hearts of those who witness them to lose all hope. Kelizandri, who is said to be the semi-divine offspring of a brine dragon and a minor demigod, and is one of the 4 powerful beings collectively known as the Elemental Lords, Kelizandri being the Elemental Lord of Water, holds power over the drowned. He gives them new purpose, crewing bone ships where they can live eternally in the moment of their death under the waves. His ships frequently plumb the depths of the great seas, casting ghostly green light down into the blackness. The ship is compelled not by a single consciousness, but by a hive mind combination of all souls held within. The ship is immune to mental effects that target only a specific number of creatures. So it's still subject to mental effects that affect all creatures in an area. Any creature that tries to communicate with the ship, telepathy or read its thoughts, it'll hear the dying screams and gasps of the crew. Which is horrifying. Another way for a bone ship to form is when mass deaths happen at sea, not unlike the Titanic. Often from an entire ship sinking far from shore, the anguish of the dying victims can spawn a bone ship. When not created through divine intervention, a bone ship can grow slowly and organically from one of the ships piloted by the undead sailors known as the draugr. The draugr is an undead creature from Norse mythology. An Old Norse meaning of the word are revenant, undead man, and ghost. The draugr live in their graves and often guarding treasure buried with them in their burial mound. They are reanimated corpses. Unlike ghosts, they have a corporeal body with similar physical abilities as they possessed in life. The draugr appear quite similar to the more common zombies, except their flesh is normally encrusted in barnacles and other nautical debris. They also constantly drip water and have a distinctive smell, combining rot and the strong scent of the sea, like an undead SpongeBob. More of an undead Viking. As draugr ships plague the seas and sink other vessels, they collect more souls and more bones, and eventually they become bone ships. These vessels, however, will look different than many other bone ships because it'll be more of a patchwork system. Rarely does anything living remain after a bone ship's passing. Only death, destruction, and waves red as blood that clash and foam in its wake. This brings us to the blood wake, which is a 30-foot diameter churning of water around the bone ship that is red with seeping blood. Any living creature that enters that water will see visions of itself drowning, requiring saving throws. When a bone ship forms, necromantic magic dredges great bones from the seabed and slowly bends them into place with malicious intent. Whale ribs typically form the timbers of the hull, and their spinal columns usually twist into towering mass. Muscles and tendons lash the ship together, tightening and loosening to precisely turn the ship as it sails. When a bone ship encounters another vessel or finds some other opportunity to sow death, smaller corpses strewn throughout the ship animate to form a crew and a boarding party. Each crew member resembles a humanoid skeleton, and they might have been made of bones of multiple creatures. These entities have appearances matching those the bound souls had in life, but aren't truly individuals. Anything that targets them, in fact, targets the bone ship they're a part of. They will be armed with rusty old cutlasses and other armaments, so they can attack anyone who comes next to the ship. Hundreds of black soul gems decorate the ship's exterior, each holding one soul. These gems hold souls of creatures whose level was 16th or lower, and they have no value. If the ship is destroyed, all these gems shatter, freeing the souls within. A bone ship is the cursed legacy of dead sailors.
For battle, the ship also creates magical cannons formed of bone that propel bone shards and debris with blasts of magic. Cannonade: the bone ship makes 4 bone cannon strikes, each targeting a different creature. Or it can use the chain shot. The bone ship makes a special bone cannon strike, firing a chain made of bones. A creature hit by this strike is grabbed by the chain. The bone ship can use interact actions to reel in a grabbed creature 50 feet per action spent, and when the ship moves, it pulls the grabbed creature along with it. It also has at its disposal the crew's call, which is the crew's anguish cried out in unison. It can also trample, and each creature that fails its save is dragged along with the ship. Pressgang soul also binds any killed by the ship to the ship as part of it.
A bone ship is gluttonous, possessing an unceasing appetite for death, destruction, and new souls to add to its number. These desires stem from an undying cause, either placed within the ship by its creator or accredited from the scattered final wishes of its component dead souls. For example, a deity might send a bone ship on a special mission to carry a message or dispose of a particularly persistent adversary or annoyance. Though bone ships usually travel upon the waves, they have no need to breathe and can carry out underwater missions at the behest of their creator. Now, if you manage to defeat it without destroying the ship, or a more powerful undead commandeers it, it can be piloted as a vehicle. Bone ships don't choose names of their own, instead being christened by dread gods who created them or sailors fortunate enough to survive encounters with them. Some names still whispered in seaside taverns are Captain Astor's Eulogy, the Crimson Mirage, Starved Whale, Horseman's Herald, Wail Upon the Winds.
Game masters can use this lore from the Great Pathfinder setting of Golarion in any tabletop setting. For Dungeons and Dragons we have used it as a sea tool of Lolth, as she harassed the party with a bone ship crewed with undead drow. The bone ship called the Underdeath. We can do an entire video series on the Queen of the Spiders. Her lore throughout the Dungeons and Dragons setting is quite immense. From Deities and Demigods released in 1980, where we got some stats and gameplay for her spine crawl of a form. We get more in-depth look at her in Evermeet Island of the Elves by Elaine Cunningham. In the first part of the book, it is narrated of the gods of the Elven Pantheon, and in particular of the betrayal of Aroshni, who wanted to remove her partner and lover Corellon Larethian to gain his powers. To achieve that, she obtained the help of several other evil deities, eventually causing a god's war. Aroshni eventually becoming Lolth.
Now to quote the mighty Gluestick AJ Pickett, whose amazing channel I will link below, we are about to get deeply nerdy. Or as we say here at Orc Soup for the Dragon Soul, down the rabbit hole we go. A naval combat will most definitely ensue with the bone ship involved. Now back in the day, we used the article from Dragon Magazine 116, and I actually still use that today for nautical terms and a few other things. I'll try to link to that below as well. The High Seas article by Margaret Foy gives a great summary as to why so many tabletop adventures lead to the sea. However, her first paragraph sounds way cooler with a female voice and a different accent, so here we go.
By far, ships have excited the imagination more than any other form of transportation. Odysseus, Horatio Hornblower, Sir Francis Drake, Captains Ahab, Nemo, Blood, and Bligh, the Beagle, the Argo, and the Flying Dutchman, the list of names goes on and on. Ships battle wind and wave, sea monsters, fate, and each other, and those aboard run the gamut from shining hero to basest knave. Ships have a way of stimulating the imagination, generating interest in the high seas and nautical adventure. This affection is no stronger than in the gaming hobby, where sailing miniatures and board games garner attention and reflect this preoccupation with the age of sail. Role players who are thus afflicted may take heart. Now, one can satisfy two cravings at once: the desire for adventure on the high seas and playing the A&D game. Much of this article is based upon information relevant to the age of sail up to the 19th century. However, there is no reason why an advanced nation of a fantastic world could not produce ships much like the big sail craft popular during that era. Sailing ships should evolve in magical worlds, as they have in our technological one.
I love the way she says ships and era. There is so much room for exploration for character on the high seas. We even had a Warforged role-played as Jack Sparrow, short the Amber Heard droppings on his pillow. Every session with that character, that shit was fire. It was hysterical. So we will be covering lore and canon on multiple games and often crossing it over. I'm in the process of editing a novel that will be a good intro to the lore for our homebrewed campaign, so kind of stoked about that. Still have a bit of work on the Ghost Ship episode to do, and we have some great shorts on some monstrous beasts and cryptids coming this week, along with the next installment of The Misadventures of Mad Dog Jalapeno and Coco. Now, if you stuck around this long, we appreciate it immensely. I've said it before when the OGL was still up in the air. They can trademark and put a price tag on many things. They do not own theater of the mind, and that's where most role-play tabletop gaming occurs. So in a world gone mad, we all still have this great escape and an outlet. You'll see here, the house always rules on the side of funny. And with that said, once again, thank you. Thank you very much. And here's a very dramatic ending for our Bone Ship lore presentation. Bone Ship ships hold a legendary reputation among sailors. These undead can appear out of nowhere to wreak destruction, and if a crew's bodies are absent from a shipwreck, it'll be blamed on a bone ship. The sea can bring death suddenly in many ways. But there are things in the many realms far worse than death, like the eternal enslavement of the soul that comes with being part of a bone ship.